computer. All right. And then I have to start to share 1 second. All right. So with React hooks, came into React 16 version 16.8. So it alleviates a lot of those problems of where to put the state and state management and basically those class components. Now you don't need necessarily to use all of that class components with a lot of that life. So for instance, with use state, you basically don't have to set it up in the same way. You don't have to set it up in that constructor. You definitely don't have to track set state anymore. You don't have to use the this dot keyword anymore. So it's a lot cleaner, to be honest. Plus, you can stay within functional components, which means they're much more easier to test, and you don't have to rewrite. A lot of problems with React is sometimes you need to take some older functional components and then rewrite them in class components, and then you got to migrate them and all that stuff. Here you can hook into it, and it's just a JavaScript function at the end of the day. Feels really nice, and you can use state with it, so it's really great. So here's a little example just of what you do. You use state is this hook. In use state, you now have this line here, which does the initialization. You have the count, which is the variable you want to track, and you have the mechanism to increment that. And then you basically just set the value of it to 0. And then all the way down there, you can just call set state and count +1, and it updates it, and that's it. You don't need the word this dot keyword. You don't have to worry about all those extra brackets, this and tracking, this dot state dot set state and all those kind of things, right? So it kind of eliminates the clarity. It's pretty clear, and the fact you can just add it to a JavaScript function is pretty nice. The next one is called use effect, which ties into lifecycle. So now we can give a functional component lifecycle. It's pretty crazy, really, when you think about it. So combined with use state and use effect, you get those main features that you so wanted, doing your lab tests or whatever, when you were trying to hook, did the component mount and did it update? So you can actually tie into those by using this use effect hook. So on render, you can actually set the state to that. And so look at how much smaller this code is compared to a class component. It's very clean. And there's other things as well. I mean, we're only talking about hooks. There's something called context API that basically acts like the router, in terms of if you wrap your entire application around this context API and you put something in context, like say, I don't know, like a preferred language or some kind of maybe a list or something like that the whole application needed to know about, then you don't have to pass it down through components, because that's the problem, is where do you put the state? Do you put it down here? Do you put it up here? Like how can these componentry access this state here? And you get into that really big problem. It's very confusing. They would do prop drilling and event handling to get it out, and then put it at the top level. It gets really messy, right? So you could, in fact, at the top level, wrap this entire tree in a context. Now we're talking about context API. We're not talking about hooks so much, but there is a hook called use context. So again, there's more hooks, but just to let you know, like, some of the state problems and pain points you felt, there already been solutions for them. So, but those are more advanced topics. But I just wanted to go over hooks because I thought I like them quite a bit, to be honest. So I actually don't really like class components, to be honest. But one time, that's all we had. So quickly, I might show this example before. So this is using React Router and React Hooks. So when this component loads up, we have the navigator. We're switching, and this loads up a list of data from using Axios, right, on component mounted. And then when we click on this, the route changes somewhat, and then we get another call for details, right? Similar to kind of where our project might be when we're trying to output our chat information. Right, so we have our router, browser router, and obviously this is all review from router DOM, and we wrap our entire application, all our components in this kind of router, which gives all these components access to the router, which then we can navigate through and trigger routes and redirects and all those kind of things. But what we're really after is, previously I showed it without hooks, but I wanted to show you what it looks like with hooks. So if you go to users, we import React, we import our hooks from using destructuring, and then we add Axios, pull in the link for from the router DOM to trigger a link. And then here we go, right away we have, if you notice, a functional component. We don't have set state in a constructor because there is no constructor. And then we have use effect right away. So that's going to say when the component mounted, we can tie into that. Also, if it does unmount, we could too. But if we leave this array as empty, it's only going to run once on the first render. So on the first render, it's as if component did mount. We're going to go ahead and we're going to fetch our items. And inside our items is we wrap it in a sync await, but we do axios.get, and then we do the second one here is set state, which is giving our component, our function component state on the item list. And usually, if you notice, the pattern is the name items, but then you have lowercase set items. So it doesn't matter if it's counter and set counter or sandwich and set sandwich, whatever it is. You basically, you need to put the set in front of it, and then you basically have this use state. And the hooks are usually lowercase use, right? So here we basically default this initial state value to empty array, and then once it updates it in this value right here, set state, set items, it's going to trigger the render of, it's going to re-trigger the render of this portion here, which is our JSX, and inside of that is our items, right? And if you notice, there's no this dot state dot items or this dot, there's no this keyword, and there's no access to state, this dot state. So that nicely just maps it and refreshes it, and then we have that link to trigger to go to the next the next page here. So when I click on this person, it'll go trigger that request, and very nicely it does that. Again, it goes through the router, so that would go through and fall through this route path, this switch, which is a user and ID, and now it says render the user details component. User details looks like this. Now, one thing to notice, again, sorry, we already went over that. The match keyword, right? When you're passing in parameters, that's from routing that has the match, and inside the match we can get the parameter ID, which we want to trigger our next get request. But again, we're talking about hooks, so we use state and use effect, same pattern. On load, we render fetch item now for one single item, same pattern. We set, but here it's singular item and set item, and then we basically go through the same process. When it returns, we actually set the item on it, update it, and then we re-render this part here because now we have the data. So really simple but very powerful, and to be honest, I prefer this over class components, to be honest. Pull in what you need when you need it, those kind of things, and then there's more powerful hooks as we go. So our lab today is just a simple tutorial just to get you started with understanding hooks. You know, it's, again, we're going to go through and look at a button class component, then we're going to try to go and it's basically, you know, like you click a button and it'll like a counter, and then try to figure that out and go through and use, you know, functional components in that place of that, and just getting used to using those hooks and understanding why you would want to replace all of this work, right? So this is just a nice little lab to, you know, go through this, understand, you know, how to use a functional component with state, and then you might look at your coding a little differently when you're working through that. So try to go through that, and you know what, I do have a demo to show you just how to put up your back end and front end, but get started on that. I'm going to try to get a hold of this person here. Hopefully he's able to do it, and then you guys can talk about blockchain.